Saturday morning, the Experts program continues on Power Talk Radio. That means Luis Alvarez, CEO of the Alvarez Technology Group, is joining us right now. Welcome, Luis.
Good morning, Mark. How are you?
Doing pretty good. So we have a really interesting topic to talk about today, and it's something that is contemporaneous to the news and what we're going through with these protests that have taken place across the country. It has to do with Amazon and Microsoft and the development of facial recognition software. And both companies are saying that they're not going to sell that software to any police department until some new laws have been established. What's going on here?
Well, it's interesting. The protests have led to a lot of kind of introspection at the technology level. Technology companies have started to look at themselves and say, what are we doing to aid and abet some of this bad behavior that's going on? And IBM, for example, decided that they were going to abandon the facial recognition market completely. They're just leaving it altogether, and announced that they were doing it because they felt that their technology might be used for wrong reasons by law enforcement. And at the same time, Amazon, that makes a product called a Recognition with a K, probably one of the leading facial recognition systems in the world, has said that it's going to stop selling that software to law enforcement because they're concerned that it's being used improperly. And shortly after Amazon made that announcement, Microsoft came out and said pretty much the same thing. They said, we want to wait to see what new laws are written about the use of facial recognition in law enforcement. And there are a number of states, including California, that are right now working on legislation to govern how facial recognition software can be used. And at the national level, the House has passed some laws that includes language on what's legal and what's not legal in facial recognition. So all of that just kind of has snowballed into this pause that these companies are taking, which will impact some of the law enforcement agencies out there that depend on this software.
Mm-hmm. Now, do we have law enforcement agencies that are already using this software, but it can be controlled from whomever the vendor was that they purchased it from? Like they could turn it off or disable it?
Most of the software is sold as a subscription. So basically it's hosted by the company, whether it's Amazon or Microsoft. So it's very easy for them to just basically hit the off switch and say, you can't have it anymore.
Right.
And that's effectively what they're doing. And in some cases, facial recognition is used for very important purposes. For example, TSA and Homeland Security use it to monitor people that are coming into the country from Europe and Asia to make sure that known terrorists or known criminals can't sneak in. There's a question as to whether that will be impacted. If Microsoft and Amazon are just talking about local law enforcement, police departments in cities and states, or are they talking about a broader, larger impact? And they haven't really clarified it yet, but I suspect that those efforts at the national level are still ongoing. And what we're really talking about is local police departments that are trying to use facial recognition as a way to potentially harass or go after people who were at the protests and make their lives a little bit more difficult.
And I would imagine that, for example, if you're some podunk police department and you have this software turned off, you may not have a lot of recourse with, say, Microsoft or Amazon, but you start getting into agencies like the FBI, the NSA, CIA. That'll be very interesting when they try and turn that software off for a large government intelligence gathering agency. Now we could start to see where the Justice Department or these agencies would want to take those companies to court and really have this thing out.
I suspect, again, that at the national level, those agencies probably have significantly more pull than a local police department. So they may quietly continue to use the software. And they're using it for, I think, the kind of good reasons that we want to use facial recognition. The problem with the software used at the local level is that there's a lot of training that goes into it. We have, for example, facial recognition systems that we sell primarily for access control so that, rather than using a key fob or some sort of code, people can just have their face recognized and then they can go into a building or log into their computer as a biometric system that both Apple and Microsoft provide. And those are somewhat benign uses. It's just when you get into the area of mass using of facial recognition that you get a lot of false positives, and that's been proven over again. And they're concerned that law enforcement might use these systems to try to get to people that maybe weren't the right people. And so it's a slippery slope, and I think they're just waiting to let the law catch up with the technology at this point.
Although when you talk about something like a national law, these companies are looking for a national law. I don't know if a national law about this crosses any constitutional lines. Does it violate concepts of federalism? And can a local agency say, hey, this isn't the federal government's bailiwick? to be involved here. Like, for example, a very large police department like New York or Chicago would obviously have the resources where they could seek some sort of legislative redress, or they could go to the courts and fight something like a national law saying, hey, that's going beyond the bounds of what the federal government is authorized to do. So the one thing I know about this is that if there is a federal law that comes down, it could be challenged. It could end up in front of the Supreme Court. It could be quite a while before you get a final on something like this.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think, anything that infringes on constitutional rights, and, some people argue that facial recognition is unreasonable search, right? And so it falls into the realm of the Fourth Amendment. That's going to go all the way up to the Supreme Court for a final decision.
And we're just talking about how individual policing agencies or a state trooper's office, highway patrol, might respond to a national law. We're not even to the point where individuals are going to seek their own redress about this type of a situation. I mean, that could be an entirely different court case and an aspect of the law that is yet to really have been explored. So it's one of the good and the bad things about the system that we live under. One of the things is it takes an awfully long time, oftentimes, Lewis, for things to be resolved. But there's a very good reason for that, right? We don't necessarily want decisions to be made that are permanent based upon whatever the flavor of the month happens to be, right? We want things to be fully vetted. We want to hear as much opinion and argument as possible from all interested parties that would be impacted by something like this, so that whatever decision is made or arrived at really takes into consideration what is best for everybody and how can we go forward without impinging the rights of individuals and organizations.
Exactly. And I think slower is better when it comes to those kind of decisions and when it comes to those kind of deliberations. We can't rush to judgment, and I don't think hopefully that's not going to be the case in this situation as well.
Luis Alvarez, CEO of the Alvarez Technology Group, has been our guest today. Reach him at the Alvarez Technology Group by going online to alvareztg.com. At AlvarezTG is the Twitter handle. And Luis, the toll-free number for the I-Team.
Give us a call at 866-78-ITEAM. That's 866-784-8326.